Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our TGT Writers podcast show, in which I'm joined by my very special team of scribes as we talk about our latest articles and give our reaction to the latest Arsenal news. So let's crack on with today's show. Hello, boys. How are we? Are we good? Are we well?
Good afternoon.
See, we had a comment that we just talking about it offline. And the next comment up is from Abdullah.
Drew's dreary image is here. Don't worry.
Yes, we need Drew's dreary image is what the comment was. And you've got it back. He's back. So he's smiling. Take a picture, someone. Take a screenshot. Send it to him. Tweet him with a screenshot of Drew smiling. That'll make his day. How are you, Drew?
No.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm fine. Like I told you, my back's acting up today, so I'm kind of
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Sitting down and just don't have to move, and you can relax as much as you can.
that actually makes it worse. Being immobile makes it worse.
They're in pain then.
This is why you're not a physio.
I tried my best. Johnny boy, how are we doing? You've been watching all the tactical breakdowns this week, mate?
Yeah, it's one of the highlights of my week, I think. So if you haven't seen the tactical breakdown this week, go check it out. It's absolutely fantastic.
There you go. Who was it this week, John? Out of interest, you know who it was?
Nope. gonna put me on the spot like that. Thanks.
Look at that, the commitment to the show.
Yeah.
It was Hassem Awar, John. If just for those that want to go and check out our tactical breakdowns, I know that you're a lot more committed than one of my lead writers is, but yes, sure. And making up the team, the man that I know watches every single show on the channel and more. It's Owen. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. 2020, man. I swear to God, the club's turning into a soap opera, and I'm now getting our most reliable information.
Turning into Arsenal has been a soap opera for a long time.
And then now we're getting our most reliable information from a hamster.
Gerbil.
Sorry.
We have no idea who this is.
Wrong pronoun. I've actually heard that it's David Ornstein's brother. I've heard it's Hector Bellerin, and I heard it's Stan Kroenke himself. So your guess is as good as mine.
I think it's Stan Kroenke. It definitely is. Definitely.
Even if it isn't, I'm just gonna go with Stan Kroenke.
Oh dear. And obviously, thank you ever so much, everyone in the chat box that's turned up this evening. I'm well aware it is Champions League semi-final night, to the absolute dismay of, I know, Drew, who would have rather been watching Leipzig than doing this podcast, maybe. But in terms of
I'm doing both. I know what you're talking about.
I'm just completely multitasking. I mean, you're going to see John's head going like this because he's watching the game, I'm sure, elsewhere as well. Yeah. I'm the only one who's not watching the game. If you were watching the Gooners podcast, they have a go at me for multitasking on podcasts, and all three of my guests are multitasking on today's show. But don't worry, they're going to be focused and ready to answer all of your questions in the chat box. And speaking of which, we've got a couple of people talking about Gabriel. Matt Gray says, I think Gabriel will be a great signing, but shouldn't we be trying to sign players who want to play for us? He seems to be on the fence between us and Napoli. Drew, I'm going to start with you, mate. Gabriel, the latest information is that Arsenal's bid of 22 to 24 million euros has been accepted now by Lille, and we're now waiting for a decision possibly tomorrow, if you're to believe some in the nose about it, that we should have a decision about where he's decided to go between ourselves, Napoli and Everton. So what are your thoughts on the situation? And does the fact that this has sort of been a prolonged thing based around this player not being able to make his mind up about where he wants to go, does that sort of sully the waters for you at all, or is it just part of the game?
I don't think it sullies the waters. I think it's normal. When you have a player who, of his, the level he's already at, plus his potential, going for that fee, which is incredibly affordable. That's why someone like Everton can go in from and maybe put in a bid, but it's not surprising. I think a lot of defenders are coming out of the French market in recent years that have gone on to bigger clubs, to top 3 leagues, and have done incredibly well from the jump, without much adaptation needed. So I'm not surprised. I'm not necessarily worried about it either. I think we can certainly say that maybe long-term we have a better project than Everton. Napoli, I think they're a better club to go to than a lot of people give them credit for. And I know that a lot of people still think down on Serie A, and they say, well, London's more attractive than Naples is the city, but that all depends on what the person wants to do. So I'm fine with it. It's part of it. But that's, I think, the angst amongst the fan base is when, they get angry about why can't we, seal the deal faster with players. But the nature of it is they have the control of how, what decisions they want to make. If his agent or himself wants to start a bidding war, they can do that. So I'm fine with it. For business, for value, that's what we keep talking about in terms of players that you want to get on the lower end of the market in terms of how much you want to spend, and then where they can be projected to be within 3 or 4 years' time. That's kind of the signing we're going to need. So I'm probably more along the lines of being happy with a deal like this than something for Uba, which would have costed more than twice in. I would have been 60 million, euro.
Yeah.
Last summer, was it? So this makes more sense for us, I think, in terms of moving forward financially. It doesn't require us to have to really sell too much to kind of bring him in. This is already in the budget, essentially. I think it's part that we have to worry about, perhaps. But I'd be happy with it. I'm not worried about it. My only hope would be if he ends up going to Napoli or to Everton, depending on which one he goes to, we have to make sure that we have a plan B ready to go. We can't be going into, the season still trying to struggle with where we're going to get a center back from. That's kind of like my bigger concern would be to see if the structure has learned its lessons from years past, where don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure you have other targets lined up and ready to go if this one falls through. So that would be my concern with this moving forward. But in terms of the player, I think it's a brilliant business if we pull it off, and I'm happy with it if it goes through.
For sure. There was information, as Simon says, about Napoli coming in late with an increased offer contractually, and that might be what the player wants. You'd hope that we'd be able to obviously entice him. Supposedly the knock of Arsenal is different to that of other clubs, and I suppose this is going to put that sort of theory to the test. And no matter how much money is being offered by Napoli, John, if we're looking at what Arsenal can offer, Napoli, yes, are going to be in the Champions League next season. He's been playing. Are they going to be in the Champions League next season? I've got that wrong. I feel like Napoli may have had a poorer season than I think. Can anyone quickly correct me on that? I feel like I know that Inter and Juventus and Lazio had a very decent season, as well as Atalanta. No, they're not, are they? They're not going to be in the Champions League. I mean, they're not even going to be in the Europa League. They finished 7th.
Yeah, they finished 7th.
So you've got Roma and Milan in the Europa League. I don't know if 7th place in Serie A now gets it, because I know they had 4 places in the Champions League. But yeah, they didn't have a great season, did Napoli? Apparently they're in Europa League according to Zlatko and Ugang as well. So we're obviously offering the same in terms of the type of football, John. You've also got the factor in of London and playing in the Premier League and playing for Arsenal as well. Are you confident this deal gets over the line? And what do you expect from sort of a backline that is now going to include Saliba and possibly Gabriel as well? Yeah,
so first of all, I just want to say how, and I tweeted this earlier, annoyed I am with this saga already. And it really is, and it's gotten to that point, that like threshold of information where everyone's just kind of echoing and regurgitating the same thing almost verbatim, all the journalists, and then it's not just once, it's like every single 20 minutes you have with maybe a couple words difference. But putting my frustration on that aside, I think that yes, I think Arsenal definitely offers a lot more of excitement for a player, especially being in the city like London, in the Premier League. You know how I feel. I think that the Premier League itself is a big pull, regardless of the competition that we're in. And if it's a level playing field with respect to the tournament, any kind of European tournament, which we still have, this is one of the reasons why getting into Europa League was so important, because we can offer that now to potential players. I don't think that we're as attractive of a club if this was a race between Napoli and us, and they can offer Europa League. It's possible that edges it. Now, you asked if I'm confident, and then I'll get to what I think will happen in terms of Saliba and him side by side. Whether I think it will happen, I think the writing's on the wall there for the reasons that I said. I think the Premier League is a very, very enticing league to come into. There's a lot of money, a lot of exposure. I think that the project, especially coming off of the FA Cup win, there's a lot of kind of excitement. Paris just scored again. There's a lot of excitement going on around the club right now. Ted is this young manager with these cool ideas, and I think that there's a lot of hype around there. So I think that's important. And in terms of what I actually see from a footballing perspective, Saliba, we saw the stats that were coming out about both of them right now, and they have they brought out the pure tackling stats, which are basically it's kind of a weird way of assessing the value or the quality of a player, of a defensive player. Instead of just taking the tackles and the attempted tackles, they take the total number of tackles and they divide it by the total number of tackles, and they add fouls committed, things like that, other other criteria that kind of gives you a better sense of the overall perspective of a defensive player. And in this case, he scores very highly on that. And I think that when you look at the top League One players that of last season, he's I think up there. I think he's number 1 in terms of pure tackling stats. And he didn't or actually I think Saliba's up there is number 1. Gabriel's number 4. I think he's 4th. So we have, from a pure defensive standpoint, I think he attempted 55 tackles last season. I think 41 of those were successful, and in the process committed 7 fouls, which is not bad. Next to Saliba, who attempted something similar and had 0. In fact, out of all Europe's top 5 leagues, Saliba had played. Out of all defenders in Europe's top 5 leagues that have played at least 900 minutes, Saliba is the only one that had 0 fouls committed in tackling. Which you could say, look, it's the French league. The Premier League is going to be difficult, but even if you're a young player and you get lucky most of the time, that's a significant stat. Plus, Gabriel's left-footed, which I think I mentioned before is extremely important. That was one of the exciting things about Mari, was that he was going to be left-footed. I think that it's going to be able to open up Pepe and on that right-hand side, being able to move the ball like Luis does to Aubameyang. One of the things that Pepe offers is his speed on the break, and I think that being able to bypass a press in the midfield by getting a defender who, from everything I've seen of him, looks like he has a good long pass. So I think it's an interesting signing, and I think that if we can get the deal done and just stop talking about it, that'd be happy, because we hear about this different knock, and sometimes I wish that we had the same knock because people seem to get deals done quicker than us. But whatever, as long as it gets over the line and he can help us, which it looks like at least there's like an inherent logic in what he could bring to the team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just looking. It's funny you were bringing out those pure tackle statistics, because the article I wrote for the Modern Footballer magazine on Saliba is one of the things I brought up, and I was talking about how he continued. So I was saying here, however, he continued to impress in these limited showings. According to Squawka, Saliba's pure tackle success, a statistic calculated by combining total tackles, challenges lost, and fouls conceded attempting a tackle, came out at 79.2%, which is the third highest of any player in Europe's top 5 leagues to play over 900 minutes this season. And I know that's the stat that you were talking about, and that is just for a player that's 18, 19 years old.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And I was just going to add on to that. That with that stat, you have that, which is incredible. But to add the fact that Saliba did not commit a foul in the process of any of those tackles is unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It is. It's absolutely. And to be fair to Gabriel, his stats as well, as I was just showing on the screen, again, are mightily impressive. Looking at sort of his defensive statistics, winning 71.1% of all duels that he gets involved with, 75.7% of all aerial duels, nearly 6 interceptions, recovering more balls than he's losing for a centre-half that loves to play a pass. In terms of those long ball passes, we just have a look at those briefly. 8 long passes in each game, 50% accuracy, 51 passes in each game, and 86.6% accuracy. Passes into the final third, 9, a bit over 9 in each game. He's a progressive centre-back in terms of his passing. Dribbling-wise, he's not. Dribbles, 0.31. And if we compare that to Saliba, you see instantly the difference with these players that Saliba is one that will take the ball out from the back. You look at 19 dribbles, 1.46 compared to Gabriel's 0.31, I think it was. So considerable amount of more times where you see him bring the ball out from the back, offensive duels. But defensively, Saliba is just looking so strong. 78.2 of his duels he was winning. 4 interceptions, which is less than Gabriel's, it's fair to say. But those two as a partnership just look really, really exciting. Owen, talking sort of and rounding things off on Gabriel, one of the key things I wrote today in the piece was talking about how Arsenal need to be really smart about the types of signings that they make and the fees that they spend on these players. The most recent information we've got is the deal, as I said to Drew, is going to cost between 22 and 24 million euros, which equates to just under 20 million pounds. That looks an incredible deal for someone of his quality. Does it give you the confidence that Arsenal now are of the ability to kind of get these deals over the line in a much more financially viable way?
Yeah, well, I think, as you say, especially with the incoming of Saliba, it's extremely positive to see them actually being active, looking when bring somebody in with the profile of Gabriel. I think, as you pointed out, with the statistics there, that they would complement each other quite well. I think that would probably be a good pair. And the one thing that I would say is that when you look at the French league, I think that with the lack of depth in comparison to the Premier League and maybe some other leagues, is that pool for statistics can be tainted at times, and it can build an unnecessary expectation, an unmatchable expectation to some of these players when they make the move to the Premier League. I just don't think sometimes we give ourselves enough credit for how good the depth of quality is within the Premier League. So as I've always said, he comes in. I don't think you'll see that pairing be solidified within the first season that they're at the club. I think that would be a rotation of Gabriel and Saliba. But look, I'm not as respectful as Drew. I'm going to say, I'll say that I consider Serie A to be quite a dead league apart from maybe the top few teams, which is...
Oh, you're going to upset some people there, fella.
I do. I know. I don't even care. I'm in a bad mood today.
Fair play.
No, but look, it's quite evident. I think that unless Napoli come in with substantially higher offer than Arsenal are given, if it's an extra 20,000 a week or 30,000 a week, I still think he comes here. Because, and I don't think Napoli have the financial resources to completely strong arm Arsenal out of this deal. So yeah, I would be very confident of this one being done, and you only have to look at our recent history of beating Napoli. It seems to me when we go head to head with Napoli over anybody, we seem to come out on top. So history speaks for itself.
It does. I mean, you think of the Pepe deal, for instance. I think, am I right in saying that Torreira, there was links to Napoli with him? I think when we were going as well. There's other players that we've been in for that Napoli have wanted, and we've managed to get them. Arsenal are. You look at them as a club that have a higher standing location as well in being in London compared to Naples. I was meant to go to Naples this year, and when it didn't happen for obvious reasons, a lot of people said, "Oh, that's all right, mate. Don't worry. Naples isn't that great." So I mean, there you go for an opinion on Naples. I just want to go for the pizza, to be honest. But in terms of the sort of decision, I think it makes the most sense. And it looks like Koulibaly could be off for Napoli, but he might not be. And if Gabriel signs and Koulibaly is still there, Manolas or Manolas, or whatever you want to call him, is still there, then you've got that. I mean, you've got that situation where effectively he could struggle to get into the first team regular minutes. You were talking about a possible rotation between him and Saliba. I think that if Gabriel was to come in, he'd be looking at starting. I agree with you on Saliba. I think he will rotate. It's likely Mustafi will be here next season when he returns from injury. You've got Pablo Mari to come back as well. There's lots of options that we could go with. We could still play with a back three. I mean, that's still an option next season. So having a plethora of centre-backs isn't necessarily a bad thing whatsoever. So that kind of rounds off the stuff regarding Gabriel. Now, moving on to the second section regarding Arsenal actually making some signings. I mean, John, you've been fed up with the amount of time it's taken to get signings across the line. But I don't know why, because we've only made 3 of them. I don't know what you're moaning about.
I can tell you exactly.
But we've signed Jonathan Dinzei from Spurs on a free agent. We've signed Tim Akinola from Huddersfield on a free agent. The Spurs guy, Jonathan Dinzei, was 20 years old. Tim Akinola is 19 years old. And, of course, we signed George Lewis, which was kind of done a while back. I don't know if I was ahead of the curve or something, because I swear we did a show about 2 months ago on George Lewis signing, but it was confirmed.
Tactical breakdown. It was a tactical breakdown.
There was a tactical breakdown, John, but there was some information on him when he was signed from the Norwegian Football Manager researcher. So if you want to go and check out that information, it's on the channel. So go check it out. Type in the Gooner Talk and George Lewis, and it'll pop up. But John, I mean, it looks like what Arsenal are doing is that they're looking to sign younger players on the cheap, be it a free deal in the case of these guys, without offering them a trial. I've also heard things about Arsenal using this more stat-driven way of recruiting players at a young age so that they don't have to go through a trial. They would just based upon complete statistics analysis, which has its pros and its cons. But you've also got the second part of this, which is they're looking to bring in these players between 18 and 20 and 18 and 22 to go into the under-23s. And then you've got the likes of Matt Smith, Zach Medley, Trey Coyle going out on loan and gaining extra development time, first team senior minutes and value. Do you look at this as kind of a change of what Arsenal have been doing with their youngsters? And do you think it's a positive thing?
Well, I think that it is a more stat-driven aspect of it. We know that that Edu introduced this stat. This way of recruiting younger players on stat-driven analysis rather than the traditional scouting in the academy, and I think that that's important because I think it's a trend. I think we're seeing a lot more teams now kind of use that approach. It's not so much just going out and using the eye test. It's going out and seeing if the numbers make sense and locating certain things, certain aspects that indicate success later on down the road. And then I think one thing that just won't show up in the stats is like just the physicality of a player, which you just need to see them play. But when you're looking at the kind of decisions that we're making and the players we're bringing in, I think part of it has to do with maybe looking at, look, these are maybe diamonds in the rough that we can develop and maybe make it either first team players or sell them at some kind of a profit, considering how low we're being able to bring them in. And I think another aspect of it is that we're having a lot of these under 23 players leave, like you mentioned, Medley and either sold or on loan. And I think another aspect of it is just getting cheaper players that might still fit within that stat profile, but that allows Arsenal actually field the team for the under 23s, right? Because they still need some kind of players there that can actually either challenge for domestic or more accolades. So I think when you're looking at it, you have to look at the big picture here. And I think that there's a lot of factors involved. I think that part of it is obviously trying to find that diamond in the rough. But another aspect is just that we have a lot of players in the under 23 side that are leaving, and we need to actually field the side.
For sure. Owen, do you look at sort of these signings as sort of padding out the under 23s after sending the likes of Zach Medley, Trey Coyle and Matt Smith on loan? Or are you looking at it more as the club, in a way, looking at how Chelsea have done things in the past, where they've got a long list of players, send them out on loan, bring them back, sell them for a profit for what they actually brought them in for, and that then funds the big marquee signs that have been able to make? Do you see Arsenal going down a similar route to that of Chelsea, or do you think there's a different method behind it?
Well, I would say a bit of both, because, for example, if you're sending players from the under 23s out on loan, you wouldn't really want them coming back to just go back to where they left off. You know, you'd really want to see them start to advance towards the first team as squad players, or to be moved on if they're thought they're not going to be able to make it. So what I would say in terms of what Chelsea have done is it's scrutinized quite a lot, but when we take these young kids in, something that I would love to see Arsenal do a lot more is instill the likes of sell-on clauses within their contract. We see sell-on clauses or buyback clauses, stuff like that. Because what we see with the likes of, although they never opted to take that option, the likes of Chelsea with Nathan Ake, they sort of had first preference over it. So, in regards to these kids coming in, the one thing I would say with our academy overall is that, although this might be, look, I'm in a bad mood tonight, so I'm going to be negative, okay? All right? Criticize me all you want, man. The one thing that I would like to say about that is that I feel that our academy, while we have produced some good players at times, that the vast majority of people that come from our academy into the first team just don't seem ready to me. You know, they don't seem advanced enough at the age that they are, and they don't seem to be on a quick enough route into the first team. If you know what I mean. And we even have, I'll not go into names because I'm constantly ridiculing them. So, but we've got players like that at the minute, you know. So with these players coming in, I think that we need to be more decisive early on as to what action we're going to take with these young players, and not just let them sit and stagnate within our academy.
I'm looking forward to seeing what the likes of Zach Medley and Trey Coyle do at Gills. Obviously, that is my most local team to where I live currently. So a couple of scouting trips, a couple of tactical breakdowns live might have to take place at Priestfield to watch the two play. Drew, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I just think that, you were kind of almost answering the question for ourselves. If we're bringing in younger players this summer, and we've questioned maybe the pathways for our own youth, like our youth prospects or the kids that come through the academy, it's probably because these kids aren't good enough. And I think, and that will seem harsh, but the reality is I genuinely think that a lot of the fan base really does overrate the players we're producing in-house. And I think that, there's a reason why, and the report started to come out that what we're doing with the scouting at senior level already started to happen at youth level. And I think that kind of tells you all you need to know. And we've gotten lucky in the past, maybe with certain players who've come through, but a lot of fans will ask why we're allowing good young players to leave. If a player is good enough to make it into the first team, the player will make it into the first team. I mean, that's kind of it, which is why you see that not just in other clubs in the Premier League, but other clubs around the big leagues in Europe. So and if they're repeatedly getting loaned out, it's because they haven't hit that level yet. And they might not ever, but they're getting their chances to once you like I've been saying, if by the time you're 19 years old, if you haven't broken into the first team, you're either going to be loaned out until you progress enough to be considered, or you're going to be loaned out so you can be sold. And that's things like what clubs like Ajax do, and what we've seen Chelsea do. And we kind of take the piss out of them for it, but they've made a lot of money doing it. But they've also had some late bloomers come back in and then maybe show themselves, and then they can work their way into the team that way. Not as an 18 or 19-year-old, but maybe as a 21-year-old instead. So, yeah, no, I just kind of feel like if we're bringing younger players to some of what we've already done, that's sort of telling already. Maybe they're needed. Maybe it's not just because we're doing it just because we're going to sell them in 2 years. Maybe it's because we actually want better younger players at the club. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I think Hugh Gang sums it up quite well, saying it's a cultural change in a way of targeting the transfer market, taking small risks with these young lads and develop them over time. It's like how many big corporations operate in their talent management sort of schemes. And I get that completely. And I think that it's something that Arsenal will have missed out on. The problem is that I don't know if people have looked into this, but sort of the loan system, especially within these clubs like Chelsea, is being hit quite hard over the next few years or so. The number of players that can actually be loaned out to European clubs, for instance, is going to be capped. You're going to be looking at loans in general being capped. And Arsenal may be a little bit too late to the boat on this one, but it doesn't mean that they can't start doing it with the players that they've currently got in the books. I'd much rather see the likes of Zach Medley and Trey Coyle and Matt Smith getting out on loan, Mavropanos as well, getting out on loan at decent clubs, be it League One. And I mean, Danny in the chat box, obviously Danny GFP, make sure you go check out Berkan Wonderland, saying that he's a little bit frustrated that they're moving to League One clubs. Maybe they should be moving off to Championship clubs. I'm just happy.
What if they're not good enough to move to Championship clubs? That's the thing. And we're not the ones that can judge that. So
yeah, I agree with you 100%. And they might not be. Other people would say that Zach Medley has been on the Arsenal's books for a long time, and people have suggested that he should be getting time in the first team. I mean, the fact that it's Gillingham that he's gone to, and whilst there is a small amount of bias being the local team, I can tell you that Gills aren't an amazing football club by any stretch of the imagination. He's coming to do a job. They've lost Max Amer. He's going to replace him. And it's a strange move, I think, because I thought Zach was probably of a level higher than League One. But in terms of physicality, it's going to help them deal with that. Coming back into the Premier League, it makes them more competitive. Getting minutes against senior professionals is always going to be a positive. So for me, I just think that it's a positive move overall. As we come to the halfway point of the show, this is the opportunity I'm going to give the guys to give a shout out to their latest pieces. Owen, you've got a piece coming out very soon, I'm sure, and you've of course just released your piece on Aubameyang. Do you want to give people some insight into those?
Yeah, so I was inspired, obviously. Just I'm sure, like a lot of us, all I can think about is that Gabonese gorgeous striker, and so that led me to write my piece on him this week. And I was absolutely bricking it the whole week that we got some sort of bad news, and me just spent my time writing this. So no, his story is actually rather interesting. It's funny how I always looked and wondered why he was so extravagant in the way he dresses and the way he behaves, and it's really funny because he takes a lot of that from his mum, who's actually a fashion designer and a boutique owner. So it's funny just to realize how much people are a product of their environment growing up, and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is very much that in terms of his mother and his father. So it's very good. But on Friday this week, I'm gonna sort of opted to go with a new one, and it's funny because there's not much history in terms of Arsenal, but I thought I'd cover Willian this week, and 3/4 of the way through, and already his story is fantastic. Especially his early life is so interesting, such humble beginnings from the guy. So definitely Friday, keep your eyes peeled, it'll be coming.
Awesome. Yeah, if you haven't already checked out Owen's piece on Aubameyang, please make sure you click on the link in the description to go to the website and click on our blog section and you'll find it there. Johnny boy, of course, your latest piece was a fantastic interview with our Chicago Gooners. That was really, really good. You've also got a piece with Owen, which you're excited about, talking about that.
Yeah. So Dilly is obviously she's the president of the Chicago Gooners. That was the one that I had done before. And, she was fantastic, talked about how she became a fan and kind of her experience as a female Arsenal fan going to bars and stuff. And so it was a fantastic insight there. And then I interviewed this guy and working on that one. And that was great hearing about him growing up and kind of the emotional attachment that I think a lot of people are going to be able to identify with, because I feel like Owen's story would resonate with a lot, especially considering I think most of many, not I want to say most, but many fans got their start, especially in the UK, through family members. And that's kind of how they identify Arsenal, just like Owen did, with spending time with their family and celebrating together and being sad and happy and all of that emotional things that go along with supporting a club like Arsenal. So it's going to be great, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure you will too.
Yeah, 100%. And Drew, finishing us off, you've obviously been with me looking across all of the latest relevant Arsenal stuff coming out. What is your next piece you've got in mind?
Well, I have still got a piece to work on with Oba. I had the one on William published recently. I forgot the date it was, but the 15th. So, yeah. On Friday, was it? Saturday, was it? I can't remember, honestly. Yeah. And I just kind of want to look moving forward to, how I look more into the, not just the recruitment process, which you've done, but I want to look at how we're building the squad in terms of like the tactical flexibility we might see. Just kind of toying with what we might look at maybe in the 4-3-3, or if we don't go with 4-3-3, if it's, 3 at the back, how that might look, how that might sort of set the tone for us moving forward in terms of recruitment under Arteta as well. So I kind of want to link both and see and maybe give people a bigger picture about what we might be trying to do.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you go onto the website, which if you click the link in the description, it'll take you to the homepage. So if you click on blogs, you'll be able to get access to all of our latest articles. You've got the pieces that I've recently done today, talking about how Arsenal should approach future recruitment. Obviously, the reaction to Raul Sanyehi being removed from the Arsenal. Drew's William piece, which is a really fantastic one. Then you've got Owen's Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang biographical piece. We had a guest piece from Mike McDonald in 2 parts, looking at 10 things that Arsenal must do for 2021, and John's piece about not so windy Arsenal love in Chicago. It's a fantastic piece. I love the story, John, that you were covering there. It was great to get the thoughts and perspectives from people around the world. We've had Chicago, we've had yourself in Miami, we've got Owen now in Ireland, we've had a piece from Nigeria as well. So globally, we're getting loads of stories from across the Arsenal sphere. Let's move on to our final topic of discussion before we then go into our user questions. So if you are watching live, please make sure you're getting your questions ready. You don't need to post them just quite yet, but towards the end of this final section, you'll be able to throw those in, and the last bit of the podcast will be answering your questions. The new sort of leader of Arsenal is now Vinai Venkatesham, who I'm learning to pronounce better by the day, it seems. And because I need to now, I'm going to be speaking about him a fair amount. And he came out of a statement on the club, which was kind of kept relatively quiet. I didn't see any sort of big posts on social media. It was kind of tucked away on the website, which was strange considering quite how important it is to hear from the guy that's going to be leading us forward. John, I know that you've seen it. The words that he spoke about were obviously the kind of the political correct thing that we see from Arsenal, of looking about ambition, saying that we need to be in the Champions League and winning the Premier League, and that's where we want to be. He also used the classic words of this isn't going to happen overnight. But since the fallout of Raul moving on and Vinai now being the focal point of the leadership, kind of taking on the role that Ivan Gazidis had, it was not exactly the same because Josh has taken a more in-depth role at the club, but it's the most sort of biggest focal point and leader that we've got now. What was your reaction to Vinai being the main guy, and are you confident in his abilities?
Well, in terms of him being the main guy, I think that, and this is not a satisfying answer, but time's going to ultimately tell. If you want my gut reaction to this, I'm a little concerned with it. Obviously, he said all the right things, and by all accounts, I think he's very well liked. So I think that goes well for him. But this was our financial guy, and look, I think that when let's put it this way. I don't think it's going to be hard to do better than Ivan Gazidis did, right? So if that's the bar that we're setting right now, I think he's already off to a good start. And when you look at the kind of way that this is going to be structured, the things that make me optimistic about it is that it at least appears more streamlined. I think when Gazidis came in, there was gonna be this structure that was already going to exist, and it was going to be Gazidis kind of at the top of it, and then Raul and Vinai and Sven and all of them working in specific roles. Then Ivan kind of just went screw this and effed off to Italy, right? and then it kind of fell apart, and all of a sudden these power struggles to kind of determine what was going to be the lead here. There's no more CEO, so I think that was a big issue. And now Raul's gone, and Sven's gone. I think now there's at least going to be a more streamlined approach to how we're going to deal with the club from a management perspective. And I think that's going to be extremely beneficial when we're looking at stuff like recruitment, because it's not going to be a case of too many chefs in the kitchen, or which I think is what was happening before. When you look at his statement, I think it's a lot of the same kind of crap we've heard before, unfortunately. There were some positives in it, don't get me wrong. And I like the fact that he's talking about how the FA Cup, that, a club as big as Arsenal needs to be looking at the biggest trophies like Champions League in the league. But we heard that before, right? This is not the first time we've heard almost verbatim those phrases. We heard it when Emery was appointed. We heard it during the transition. We heard it with Wenger and Gazidis, and then the transition. We heard it with Gazidis and Raul and all them, and now we're hearing it again. So what makes it seem better now is for the reasons that I said before, and that I think that with a manager like Arteta, if it's true that him, Husfami, and people like Edu are going to have the ability and more of the control over transfers. I think we're going to be able to build a squad around a certain footballing identity that Arteta might have, and I think that Vinai is more okay to just stand back and let Arteta and Edu and everyone do their thing. I don't get the sense that he's going to be putting his hands in and kind of trying to affect it in a way that he thinks is better, rather than the way that he thinks, at least deferring to the people who are on the football side of it. So that's positive as well. As for the statement, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think that it was a very, very inoffensive statement, which I guess is what they needed to do at that point. But there was nothing groundbreaking, and it's really nothing we haven't heard before.
No, it wasn't. It's the same old sort of stuff that we've been given time and time again. Drew, I kind of want to pick out the point of view that the guy that's leading us forward is the person that was looked as the commercial aspect of the club. Raul was coming in to do all of the football dealings, to get the contacts, to do the negotiations. And Vinai was very much the guy that was going to do Ivan Gazidis' relationships, broker these deals. Does it fill you in any sort of apprehension that this is now the person that's going to be dealing with all football matters?
No, I think you're looking at a structure of the club moving forward, and John already alluded to it, that people who are in positions of power are still going to delegate the tasks to those who know better. And I think that's all that really matters. So while Vinai technically is the one at the top now leading forward, he's not going to have, at least my estimations, he won't have a role like Gazidis, because Gazidis had his hand in all the pies, and I think that was part of the problem. If Vinai just leaves player recruitment and things on the pitch left to Edu and Arteta, and Vinai just handles the commercial side of it, that's all you want him to do, and that's fine. And especially because he is younger, he might bring a fresh approach to the commercial side of the game for the club. When you look at it, Arsenal has fallen behind a little bit, behind clubs like Spurs, Chelsea, the like, on our commercial dealings as well. So we need improvement there. So if he's going to worry about that and just let Edu and Arteta worry about the first team, worry about player recruitment, and then let us do the contracts, as long as everyone is having their roles delegated and they have the lion's share of the say about what they specialize in, that doesn't really matter. As for the statement, I don't have a thought, because it's just a statement. What matters is what they do moving forward. So I don't really have an opinion on it. They can say whatever they want. They can spin whatever they want to spin, as long as the proof's in the pudding moving forward over the next year or two that things are going smoothly, then that's for me, that's all you can really judge it on, personally. So I'm not too fussed about it. Sometimes you need younger and fresher approaches. We just did that with Arteta, and people are happy about it. We did it with Edu in a way. People are still asking the questions and see if he can do the job moving forward. But Vinai is very much the same ilk. He's younger. He has a fresh approach. It might be more with the times. It could be a very good thing. And as football keeps evolving and it's fluid, that might be the thing we actually needed. So we'll just have to give it time to see.
Just jumping in on one point with Vinai, and you mentioned his kind of role as the commercial guy, and it's two things that either could be extremely relevant or just connecting dots that might not be there or really not as relevant. But I think it's at least worth talking about. If you remember, I forget when it was. It might have been. Let's see. It looks like around 2018, we were kind of caught up in this fraud scheme. Do you remember? Anyone remember that? It was with BID. It was this Chinese car manufacturing company. And what had happened was we had basically been defrauded of Vinai signing a contract with what was purported to be this representative who the Chinese police later said, actually that person doesn't work for us. You just signed an advertisement deal with someone who doesn't actually work for our company. And whether it's true or not, I'm not going to get into, but that's
conjecture.
The fact that he's sitting there with them and that he would have been responsible for that deal is not conjecture. That's something that he would have been responsible for. So I think ultimately it'll be fine, but this is something that does raise a red flag for me. And one thing that is conjecture is, and according to Lewis and the attorneys at Arsenal, is not conjecture, is that there was no nefarious dealings going on with Raul and this Pepe transfer, which is right.
We don't know about Raul. We know about Pepe. They've come out and said that there is no truth in an investigation into the transfer of Pepe, but we don't know if any investigation has been done on the transfer or the recruitment sector as a whole. We're sort of aware that Tim Lewis has come in and sort of looked into something is the
Correct.
Feeling that we're getting.
Right. So, and the reason I bring it up in relation to Vinai is because if you, just for argument's sake here, if we assume that there is some kind of thing that was going on with the transfer of funds, just for argument's sake, he should have known about it. Either he didn't know about it, and in which case he was completely, I would argue, negligent in what he was supposed to be doing in his role at the club, or he knew about it, in which case he acquiesced to it and allowed it to happen, which is also concerning. So for his sake, I hope none of that stuff is true. And the only reason I bring it up is not necessarily because I believe it's true, but because now he's in charge of that aspect of the club, and it's something that's relevant, I think, to the consideration as to whether he's going to do a good job or not, or if we should be concerned or not. I think it's at least relevant and something to think about and a question to ask.
Let's ask it, Owen. I mean, the question around that sort of side of the club, does it worry you?
But screw you, John. I was going to ask that question. I would see, on one hand, I'm sort of quite conflicted as to what I would believe, because on one hand, I very much feel after Raul's exit quite clean. That's the way to describe it. I feel clean. I think that Arsenal as a club has been always sort of labelled as a gentleman's club that do things the right way, and I feel that over recent times we've been anything but that. Coming from the Wenger era into today, I felt that what often happens is when you have been stuck in a certain system for so long, and it isn't working out, what tends to happen is that people jump to the complete opposite, and you sort of jump from an ice bath into a furnace just for the sake of it. And I think that now we're sort of finding the happy medium. In terms of this alleged investigation, the thing that would make me not believe it, as John alluded to, was that, but I think both Vinai and Edu would have to have been aware of some sort of deviance within them dealings, and I just can't believe that the Cronkies would have kept them two in the positions they're in if that was the case. For now, and the one thing from Vinai's statement that I did love was the fact that he seems to me like a person that is very much aware of the fact that he is not a football expert, that is not his area of expertise, and he is completely willing to hand control over to both Edu and Arteta. And to be honest with you, even with Unai Emery, as much of a tube as he was, I never liked the head coach title. It just doesn't make sense to me. If you're a manager, you're the one who is most aware of what you need within your team. So look, to boil it down, I was annoyed when the announcement was made simply for the amount of drama surrounding the club in such a short space of time. But sort of now that I've settled, I actually think that this is probably the best possible move we could have made. And I'll ask you this question. Raul seemed to me like the heavy-handed one of that group of three between Vinai, Edu, and Raul. Do you see things changing in terms of Mesut Ozil's involvement? Do you think that Raul was the heavy-handed one that was trying to fizz him out? Because I personally believe that Arteta did have some form of trust within him, and I always it was always my belief that the decision to freeze him out was coming from higher.
You would open that can of worms, wouldn't you?
Maybe it's the right can to open. No.
Hope yous are free. Hope yous are free.
Yeah, 100%.
No, it's a great question.
It is a great question. My initial reaction is, I think you've got a point about Arteta having faith in him. And I think that Arteta, whilst was kind of being given the credit for sort of freezing him out in a way and not playing him, I think that there's definitely credence in the possibility he was being pressured into doing that, to attempt sort of Ozil to think, do I really want to sit around while this is going on and not play and possibly see a move? We now know that that's not going to be the case no matter what. And we will see Ozil remain at the club until the end of his contract, it seems, unless something absolutely ridiculous happens, which I doubt it will. But I see your point. But I do have a lot of faith in Edu, personally. I like him. I know that there are tenuous links to Kia Jarabchim within Edu, but I kind of like where things are with him. I think he will work well with Arteta. I think that both him and Arteta, being former players, have a vested interest in the club's well-being and the future of the club. And I think that they're the right pair to kind of take us forwards as the synergy that they'll have together. That's just my take. Is there anyone desperate to come in on that point before I go on to questions? John just too scared of it. Drew, is that a whole other podcast?
Yeah, that's why I'm not saying anything. I mean, there's a lot we could say, but all I will say is this one quick thing. It's that when Ozil put his statement out, and he did say, he kept alluding to the fact that Arteta knows that I'll be ready if and when he needs me. And then if you connect that to the statement of that Ozil played all the way up until the pandemic hit, and then there were no matches. So what happened between then and now for Arteta to magically not rate him anymore, that seems a bit fishy. So we'll see. I mean, I kind of almost side with Owen in terms of maybe someone from higher up had maybe looking at Ozil's contract and wanted to get him out. That's speculation. I don't know, but we can have a whole other podcast about that another time. So, yeah.
Great question, by the way. Great question.
It was a great question. Speaking of which, we've got lots of great questions from our listeners' live chat that we're going to spend the last 12 minutes or so answering. But I should say that there are quite many, and you know what that means, boys. Let's try and keep these answers brief, and we can get through as many as possible. We're going to start off with this one from Jasmeet. Drew, my boy or my bro, how confident are you we'll sign Gabriel? What is your confidence level, mate?
I mean, I'm pretty confident. Again, you can't always judge what the player wants. Like, for all we know, he could want to. Someone brought it up. He could want to go to Napoli and play with Osimhen, who already went there. They were teammates at Lille. You never really know. But you would argue that London's one of the more attractive places in the world to live in, whether you're a footballer or not. So, and we have a Brazilian contingent building there as well that might help him settle. So I'm not quite sure. I'm still confident. I don't think it'll be about money. I think it'll be about footballing reasons, and I still think that we're ahead of the curve on Napoli in that regard. So I think I would probably say like 70% confident.
Awesome. I'm going to go 80%. And
go away.
John, Avon Teddington says, if we don't get Partey, who do you think we'll target instead?
Hopefully Ceballos.
I think
no,
regardless of.
No, I know he is. But I don't. That's a good question. I haven't really given it much thought. I think that what Partey brings is going to be super important to what Arteta's trying to do. This possession-based game, being able to transition the ball from defense to attack and add a physical presence in the midfield. So if there isn't any other players that might be able to kind of fit that mold, I think that's the kind of midfielder that he's going to be looking for. And it should be interesting to see how it fits in regardless with players like Willian coming in, and if he's going to be using him, or players like Xhaka, what's going to happen with him, and how they're going to fit into the midfield as well. Because when you're making these determinations, you also have to say, hey, how are they going to fit in with A, what I'm trying to do, and B, what I have already available to me. So good question.
Owen, Mike Hernandez says, anyone else surprised there hasn't been more interest in Guendouzi? And he says that wasn't a question for the guys, by the way. It was for the chat box. But we're asking it anyway. Are you surprised about a lack of interest in the Frenchman?
Yes and no. I know that's the most stupid answer I could give. But yes, in terms of his playing ability, I thought that because it was so obvious that he was on the market and that Arteta really wanted to move him on out of the club, that there would be sort of a list of clubs. Obviously, we don't know what's going on in the background, but then on the other hand, I can completely understand why maybe some of the bigger teams who would be financially stable enough to be paying that fee for him wouldn't want to take him because of the attitude problems displayed. I think now with the current climate in regards to finance, that it's probably more risky now than ever going for transfers. So if you're looking to take in somebody who has been displaying the attitude that he has now, you want to be damn sure that he has absolutely huge potential, which we aren't completely sure of with Guendouzi yet.
Drew, Christopher Fung says, with the maximum of 17 foreign players allowed in Premier League squads, will that shift the focus of our player sales to accommodate bringing in some of the foreign players we're being linked to?
I mean, probably. I think that, the majority of the players that are going to be from UK we're going to look to the academy for that overall. And I think we're going to do a lot of recruiting. Yeah, we'll be doing a lot of recruiting on the continent. It's just more affordable. I think we've all had this conversation for the last however many years now, 5, 6, 7 years, that the Premier League premium and English premium is as such that I don't think the club are going to want to spend double the player value just because they're from England, for example, another Premier League club.
We signed that wasn't from Chelsea from the Premier League. I can't think.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. I know that people are calling for maybe you can look at clubs that get relegated still have good players, but even those clubs are still kind of holding firm about their valuations. Villa wanted, even if they were going to get relegated, they were going to want 50 or 60 million for Jack Grealish as an example. Whereas maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that would have been right. Ake went for 45 million pounds, was it? We're never going to pay that. And if you can get someone like Gabriel for half that price, there's no reason why we're not going to still look on the continent for just to save money. There's still talented players everywhere in the world. You don't have to go from players that have already been in the country. So yeah, I think we'll shift foreign again. I think more so than we maybe have before. I think we're going to look to that market again, and maybe it's telling that Eddie was in the club for that reason. I don't know.
It's a weird one because obviously we've talked on the show about how much we want to sign players from the Premier League more, and it's something that we're not doing. I know that Devon has come on the show and wanted longingly to see Decore at the club. Chilwell, people have wanted to see as left back. And you look at the top clubs in England, they sign players for big money from the Premier League. Manchester United bringing in Harry Maguire and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Manchester City bringing in Walker and Mahrez and Stones and just so many other players from other Premier League teams, Sterling and Chelsea as well, looking to bring in Ben Chilwell. They're obviously bringing in the likes of Ross Barkley from Everton, bringing in other players from other English teams, Kante coming from Leicester. And Arsenal don't really spend big money on Premier League players, or rather they haven't in the most recent times. But to think that you can get a Gabriel for nearly half the price that you can get a Nathan Ake for, can you really blame the club for going down that route? But at the same time, I would still like to see more Premier League sort of marquee signings being made. I'm not talking about the David Luiz's, the Williams, the Cedrics, etc. I'm talking about a full-on signing that improves the squad in terms of the first team, and I think that Arsenal just aren't on a financial level available to do that at the moment.
Well, I was going to say, I think if our finances were better, we'd probably look to do that, but we can't afford it. So
no, we just can't. We just can't. Yeah. Carter Stage, John, says, I think we should give Balogun, Emile Smith-Rowe more chances and also sell/loan Eddie Willock and Reece Nelson.
Disagree with the last part of that. I think that we're going to need that depth in the Europa League next season, and we saw how well certain players reacted to that. I think it's a great chance, and I think they're at the level where they can provide us a lot of help there. I think we should give Balogun and Emile Smith-Rowe more of a chance as well. And I had said this on a previous podcast. I think that Smith-Rowe is a very talented player. I know that everywhere he's gone, he's been rated very highly by the fans that have watched him or by the managers. Maybe with an exception, but I think that this is one of the reasons why Europa League was important, was because we're going to allow players like that a chance to possibly impress on a European stage, and that's what happened with Saka. That's what happened with Martinelli. That's to an extent what happened with Eddie. So these are important moments for them, and I think that this competition is going to be the time for them to shine. That being said, it's also, if we're going to really challenge for top four, extremely important depth to have right now. And if we really want these youth players to succeed, I think that they have a difficult time balancing their development and their need to be able to get on a big stage like the Europa League, which is where I think that their future lie next season.
For sure. Owen, RY says Juventus seems to have an interest in Lacazette. Would you sell? And if so, who would you replace Lacazette with?
Well, the sell part really depends on who we bring in. I suppose it really, as we discussed before, it really depends on the formation. I've said that I think Arteta is going to try and go for a 4-3-3 next season, but if we were to get rid of Lacazette, I would expect us to maybe try and spend that money on a centre attacking mid, as you said. Maybe Willian plays there, I'm not sure. I would be looking to move him on, if I'm honest with you. As I've said before, I don't think he's prolific enough. In terms of where the money goes, I actually think the most likely thing, and probably what the club are holding out for, is the sale of Lacazette to bring in the funds so that we can trigger Partey's release clause. So in terms of a replacement within the squad, that's where I see that money being distributed to. So I'm actually in the small minority that think if we move Lacazette on, that we don't need to buy an out-and-out striking replacement. I think we have enough there with Aubameyang, Martinelli, and Eddie Nketiah.
Oh, I tend to agree. I'd like, if we were to sell Lacazette, to make the focus of our sort of the money that gets reinvested go straight into the Partey deal. I don't think you necessarily have to replace Lacazette with a £50 million replacement. I think that there's money available that we could spend some of that money on Partey and then see us go out and get a younger player. I would have liked to have seen us take a punt on Jonathan David from Ghent, who of course has now joined Lille to replace Victor Osimhen, but there are other options available, and Arsenal should be looking at some of them as well. I mean, we talked to James Rowe the other day about Quincy Promes, and he said that he would really like Arsenal to go to Val Weghorst, who's at Wolfsburg. So, and Arsenal seem to have lacked one of those sort of tall link-up players since Olivier Giroud left, and maybe those types of players are needed at the club. That is going to be the final question. So sorry that we weren't able to answer many more of those today. There were so many questions from all of you, and we really genuinely appreciate every single one that you throw into the chat. We can only answer so many with the time that we've got available this evening. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, and thank you to my fantastic writers that just produce some amazing content every single week. Owen, with your William piece coming up this week. Thank you ever so much for tuning in and coming on, mate.
No worries. I tell you, I have to apologise, because do you want to know what? When Drew isn't the least sad person on the podcast and least dreary person on the podcast, you know that shit's bad. So.
Yeah, I get that. Drew is the benchmark. We know that. Let me look at him.
Sorry, Drew.
Face.
I think it just made him smile.
He's just looking at this Red Bull scoreline.
Yeah, I think that is.
No, I mean, I'm not sad that they're losing. I just don't even know who I want to win. I hate Bayern more than I can even tell you, and I also dislike PSG. I don't like or be off for other reasons. So it's very much like the whole CL is a wash to me. Hopefully, Owen win. I'll back that any day of the week.
So yeah, it's horrible. Yeah. It's like watching Chelsea Man United in an FA Cup final. It's horrible when those sorts of games happen for sure. John, thank you so much, mate. I'm looking forward to your interview with the aforementioned Owen coming out soon.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one. And thanks for having me on. It's always a good time. And the chats. And again, the 305 cast. Mike was just on. If you haven't checked it out, go at 305 cast, the Arsenal Miami podcast. They just had, like I said, Mike had a great conversation. It was like right after the Raul thing, and we kind of talked about how upset Ozil's PR people must feel that they had this amazing, piece with David Ornstein, who knew would resonate with Arsenal fans, and they would read it and they probably screen the questions and then it's totally out of the news cycle. So go check it out if you get a chance. And then the piece should be coming hopefully soon. It's good stuff. And the chat's been great today. So thank you guys in the chat. Great conversations there as always.
Yeah, always fantastic discussions going in there. I love that people in the chat box are asking questions of the chat box and not just us as well. I think that's really great that you guys are starting discussions in there as well. Drew, my ever-present beautiful friend, thank you ever so much for coming on, mate. That's not to say that John and Owen aren't beautiful too. It's just
what's wrong with me?
Oh, dearie me. But yeah, Drew, it's obviously going to be interesting to see what you go down the route of your piece in regards to recruitment and Aubameyang as well. So looking forward to those.
Yeah. Thanks for having me as always. Happy to keep being miserable just to give people a laugh.
No, it's good. You set like a good level there. It's for,
Yeah,
you can only go up.
Yeah.
That's true.
Make sure you follow the guys at FM Lair at 305 Cast and at Owen Young too as well. And you can follow us at the Gunatal TV. Tomorrow, or actually I should say that yesterday we recorded a show for our expert members with Glenn Glaser. Make sure you go check that one out. If you want to see a man smoke more than anything else in the world, it's worth checking that one out. But of course, we've also got a show coming up for our Plus members tomorrow too. Make sure you tune in to listen to that one with Mike. John's not the only guy that can interview Mike, and you never know, you might get a bit of information that you won't find anywhere else when you listen to Mike. So who knows what might come out from that one. So please check out the Plus Members podcast tomorrow if you are a member. Thank you ever so much for helping us support the channel and getting it where it is today. And make sure you check out all the fantastic articles on the website too. We'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.